Hello everybody, my name is Brady and I'm a 19th century American historian and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be checking out more of Extra History's Sengoku Jidai series. But before we get started, I have a couple pieces of business that I have to take care of first. First of all, shout out to the newest channel member, Pug Lord Gabe. Thank you for becoming a channel member, and if any of you want to become a channel member, there's a link to do so in the description box below. The second piece of business is this. So we have to pick a new Extra History series to check out once I'm done with the Sengoku Jidai series. So I have a poll on the community tab, and if you're watching this video pretty close to the time of upload, I'm going to have it up for a few days. You probably still have the opportunity to cast your vote in this poll. So here we have South Sea Bubble, Admiral Yi, Otto von Bismarck, and the history of paper money. Those are your choices. Of course, you can leave suggestions for things I could put in maybe a future poll after we finish the next series, but those are the ones we have. Although Otto von Bismarck seems to be running away with it right now, there is still time if you want one of the other ones. So that's there. Now that we're done with all of that, let's get into the actual video. Alright, so now we are on number 5. The last episode really threw me off because we have a major figure in Oda being kind of taken out. I thought we were going to have him up until the end, or at least the episode before the end, but he died a little bit earlier than I was expecting him to. We get this other new character, the guy who brought the cavalry charge to Japan. We had him coming in. I thought he was going to be the big deal if Oda was going to die, but no, he's gone too. So honestly, I'm more lost than I've ever been in this series. I don't know. Now that these guys are both gone, something's definitely got to fill that vacuum. So I'm very excited to see what direction this goes. This is going to be very interesting. So let's get it started.
Last time, we left off with Oda Nobunaga attacked by his own general, dying in a blazing temple as his dream of empire burned around him. But where did that leave everyone else?
Oh yeah, so in the last one he was betrayed, and some of you in the comments told me that Oda was kind of a dick to the guy who turned on him. He kind of berated him and stuff. If that is true, then I guess that's just... I had no way of predicting that, because I did not get that part of their relationship or anything like that. I didn't get as much of that part of Oda's personality in what they presented, so I guess I can't feel too bad about not predicting it. Like, if you don't get the information or whatever. But now it kind of makes sense. And I guess I could have inferred that he'd have, like, a hard-headed personality. You don't get as far as he did without having kind of that sort of hard leadership.
Well, first off, let's start with Tokugawa Ieyasu. Remember how he was touring the Kansai with Nobunaga before he got called off to be killed by Akechi Mitsuhide? Well, that means he's now in the middle of Kansai with a handful of retainers surrounded by Mitsuhide's troops, who will certainly put an end to him if they can. Hundreds of miles from Tokugawa territory. He needs to get back to Mikawa. But how? Well, it just so happens that in his party of retainers is Hattori Hanzo. Now, it would have been really easy for Hanzo to just give up Tokugawa right there to the nearest soldiers and probably earn himself a fine place in Mitsuhide's government.
So, I started this series, I picked this one because Sengoku was the name of a character from One Piece, the anime, and I love One Piece. There's also a character in Naruto called Hanzo, but I guess culturally Naruto would be a little bit closer. It has like ninjas and samurai and all that sort of stuff. So it makes me wonder, like, I'd imagine almost definitely that name is inspired by the real Hanzo. I would assume.
But instead, he says, "Hey Tokugawa, check it. I know this wicked secret path through Koga that all of us ninja use." Something to that effect. And off they go, sneaking through the country at night, barely slipping past soldiers as they went. And they did it. First, they went to Iga, where Hanzo quietly gathered ninja to serve as Tokugawa's bodyguard. Then they went to Koga, where, despite being rivals of the Iga ninja clan, the local ninja guild spirited Tokugawa through the countryside, because he had once shielded them from Nobunaga when Nobunaga wanted to wipe them all out. And with that, once again, with the help of loyal ninja, Tokugawa escapes certain death. Next, we have Akechi Mitsuhide, the betraying general, in the middle of Kyoto,
what a
basically
jerk.
figuring, hey, he held the capital, so he was going to run the country. Operating on that notion, he started killing pretty much everybody who could threaten his new position. He slaughtered every Nobunaga heir he could find, starting with those in the capital. Although surprisingly, he didn't actually catch that many before the rest had the good sense to flee.
That is a very common way. Like, when you usurp a government, what do? You get rid of all claims to the throne. Because just because they're not on the throne right now doesn't mean they won't get it back. And I guess that sort of right of birth is something that people will use to reinforce their claim to the throne. You think of great revolutions that would happen later on. You think of the French Revolution. There was definitely some targeting of the royal family. I think a better example is probably the Russian Revolution, though. How they go after the Tsar's family. That was definitely thorough. It seems. I think it was. I mean, of course, he had family all throughout other royal families and stuff, but I think they. Didn't they take out the entire, like, immediate family? It's not my best subject, but I'm pretty sure that's what comes to mind.
Next, he sent letters asking for support or demanding submission to many of the nearby daimyo, but one of those letters was intercepted by good old Hideyoshi. But Hideyoshi was still in the middle of that siege that he'd been asking Nobunaga for help with. The scene probably went something like this. Hideyoshi is standing in front of a great lake, a lake of his own making. In the center stands the castle. He's flooded the area around it, and now the castle stands alone amidst a great sprawling expanse of water. It's impossible to supply, impossible to reinforce, and impossible to escape. It's just a matter of time until this castle's his. Then a messenger gallops up, leaps off his horse, and says, "Nobunaga is dead. Mitsuhide holds the capital." Calmly, Hideyoshi offers the besieged castle terms. All he wants is the castle itself, some nearby land, and the head of the castle commander.
So now I wonder, like, if this... So, how is this guy going to respond? Like, is he going to recognize this betrayer? Does might make right in this situation? Because sometimes that'll happen. You see the guy who clearly is in power, and your allegiance can change based on convenience. It just depends how much... Oda really, I guess, put loyalty into the head of his people. But it's so hard to tell because this is such a broad take on something that could clearly be gone into much more specifically, but it just doesn't fit the format of, like, their way of doing videos. What they do, they do things in a pretty broad sense. It's a really good way of introducing yourself to a subject.
If he gets that, he'll gladly let all the men in the castle go free. He has no ulterior motive, he's just being magnanimous in victory. The commander of the castle readily agrees, paddles out on a small boat, and opens his belly with a knife. Hideyoshi immediately turns around and spurs his forces toward Kyoto. Mitsuhide was not expecting Hideyoshi to move so fast. His forces are scattered by Hideyoshi, and he himself is killed by a group of peasant bandits as he tries to escape. It's been 13 days since Nobunaga died. Mitsuhide was officially shogun for 3 days. With Mitsuhide dead, all of the major daimyo have a meeting to sort out who will be Nobunaga's heir.
I don't get enough time to care. Oh, it's just like that guy in the previous one, the guy who he had in yellow, the cavalry dude. I didn't have enough time to care. But with him, at least I had, like, the emotional investment. Like, I followed Oda. I followed him, and I kind of was able to get a little bit about what he was about, and I was actually intrigued with his journey. So when this guy comes in and cuts that off, he inherently has significance here. But now, that's kind of underwhelming. But it is what it is. What happened happened. You can't change it. It's just not the most satisfying end for him, I guess.
Unfortunately, the one member of the Nobunaga family that Mitsuhide did manage to catch was Oda Nobunaga, Nobunaga's eldest surviving son and the official heir. In the end, after a great deal of debate, they agreed to go with Oda Nobukatsu's eldest son, a 2-year-old boy named Oda Hidenobu. This may seem a bit odd, as Oda Nobunaga had other sons who were of age to rule for themselves, but Hideyoshi is, as always, a smart guy. And I'm pretty sure he realized that he had a much better chance of taking control and ruling everything himself if there was a 2-year-old at the head of the Oda clan rather than a fully grown adult.
For a second, I thought that was stupid, but that makes perfect sense. And I've seen this... Okay, yeah, I have seen this sort of stuff happen before in other videos I've watched that kind of get into like the Eastern history stuff. There was a lot of child heirs who were controlled. I don't know how many I've done in like video form, but I've seen some stuff on this. So that actually makes total sense. I thought it was stupid. No, I'm the stupid. That's genius. That's exactly what you should do.
After that, the next several years are pretty much a cavalcade of suppressing rebellions, expanding on Oda's conquests, and yes, beating down some more warrior monks. Tokugawa and Hideyoshi even went after each other at one point, but both of them realized that they'd bleed each other dry if they fought. So in the end, Tokugawa acknowledged Hideyoshi as his lord, and Hideyoshi gave a number of special privileges to the Tokugawa clan, including the exemption from serving in Hideyoshi's armies for 10 years, which is about to become very important. But before we go over that, it's time to set all of these battles aside for a minute, and for the first time in this series, talk about civil administration. Because,
Yay!
well, this was
My
really
favorite.
The first time civil administration was possible on a national level since our story started. Hideyoshi wanted to end the Sengoku Jidai. He wanted to create a strong, centralized government, prevent civil war, and keep anyone else from threatening his position of power. So to that end, he enacted 3 major reforms. First, he completely overhauled the tax structure. Remember that the central government had completely broken down in Japan during all of this fighting, so effectively the government hadn't been collecting taxes for years. Instead, every local lord or monastery stronghold had imposed their own system of taxes on whatever region they happened to control.
That makes sense.
Hideyoshi needed to change that. Without revenue, without the ability to pay soldiers, build castles, and employ administrators, the central government couldn't exist. But before he could start
This is actually really... It's weird that this is where I start getting intrigued. I think about like those more localized governments and how they impose taxes. How are these perhaps more federalized taxes going to interact with those? Will those taxes stay in place? This is like where it becomes so interesting to me. Are they going to prioritize the upper level tax things at the expense of that? Or I'd imagine if you want to maintain control and you have all these more localized leaders, a good way of getting their cooperation might be to allow them to collect more local taxes as well, so that everybody kind of wins. Maybe you get a smaller cut than you would like, but you might get a little bit more stability and more cooperation from them, and I wonder if they're going to go that direction.
Imposing his will and charging everybody taxes, he had another big problem to solve. With the years of war and strife, no one knew exactly who had what to tax. So Hideyoshi sent out ministers to do a grand survey of Japan in order to find out what exactly was out there and how much it was worth. They divided each region up by the amount of rice it could produce and started to tax them accordingly.
That's interesting.
Completely abolishing many of the old exemptions for temples or specific lords. Now this is a pretty incredible thing, and it tells you just how powerful Hideyoshi is at this point. Sure, he has to threaten everybody with killing them if they mess with his surveyors, but fundamentally he could go into every province in Japan and assess it. He could impose new taxes, and he could eliminate the age-old exemptions. This means that for the first time, we have a real ruler of Japan.
The exemption stuff, that kind of reminds me of kind of like an estate system. It's definitely not a perfect comparison here, but you have like the peasants who get like the big tax burden, and then you have like second or estate or first estate, and they'll like not get as great of a tax burden, even though they're getting so much money by virtue of their positions. The fact that they're getting past that here is very interesting. I need an update on what year we're in, because like I always lose track of what year we're in. I keep forgetting that this is like 1500s. I keep thinking about this as a little further back, but then they do gun monks, and I'm just like, yeah, it's a little bit more modern than I am inclined to think. Whenever I think of Eastern history, I just kind of have this knee-jerk reaction in my head to go, way back. I don't know. All the images in my head are really old, but there's so much in between that still has like the samurai and ninja stuff that's like not super duper old in the grand scheme of things. It's just something that I've kind of learned wrongly, and I have to kind of unlearn so that my automatic reaction doesn't give me kind of a deceptive image of what we're talking about. It's kind of difficult. Sometimes history, when you're taking on unfamiliar periods or areas, I find you have to do a lot of unlearning before you can start learning. You gotta question what you're assuming.
But besides taxing, he also has to stop all the fighting. So secondly, he demands that all peasants give up their swords and turn them over to his administration. He felt like having a massively armed populace was a destabilizing factor.
Gun control?
Leading to peasant revolts, banditry,
Gun monk
insurrection.
control.
And he was probably right. So on top of collecting all the swords, he forbade peasants from ever owning swords or guns in the future. This again shows just how powerful Hideyoshi is at this point, to be able to get everybody to turn over their weapons without a fight. Which he then did the morally upstanding thing with, and had them all melted down and turned into a statue of the Buddha. Finally, Hideyoshi established a permanent caste system in Japan.
Over here, we melt down statues and turn them into bullets. So, isn't that funny? You did it the other way around.
And peasants were peasants, merchants were merchants, and samurai were samurai forever. No more switching between classes. Which is a little bit ironic because you may remember that this Hideyoshi guy, who just got himself declared regent of Japan, was a peasant himself and started all of this out as a sandal bearer. He completely forbid anybody else from taking the path that he himself took to greatness. Additionally,
Yeah, there's a lot of people who kind of take that route and like burn the bridge behind them. Like the most common example I get to reference is, because I do a lot of videos on the guy Alexander Hamilton. Like the guy, he wasn't the worst off out of people who come to mainland America, but like he had a rough start. Once his mom died, he lost a lot. But then he becomes this Federalist dude who doesn't really like democracy, doesn't trust ordinary people, wants the clean, proper people to make all the decisions. So, yeah, coming from kind of rising up in status and then burning the bridge behind you, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense ideologically, but I don't know if that's the direction we should observe something like that from. It might be more pragmatic rather than philosophically consistent.
He put severe restrictions on travel. Peasants no longer had the right to travel freely or to change their farm if they didn't like where they were. They were permanently tied to the land on which they lived.
Serfdom?
And while this may seem damaging in the long run, it certainly made rebellion much more difficult, and it increased the overall productivity and thus tax revenue of Japan, as peasants were stuck working their land rather than going off on military adventures. In fact, this system, awful as it might sound to us today, basically stayed in place until 1871. It wasn't until the questions of industrialization and modernization began to come up that social mobility and national productivity trumped the value of a rigid system to enforce peace. So Hideyoshi created a tax system, rounded up all the swords, and locked people into feudal castes. Now all that's left is to figure out what to do with those few 100,000 armed men kicking around his country who have no marketable skill other than being trained killing machines. And since we all know that having a great number of warriors with no war to fight never ends well, Hideyoshi found something for them all to do, namely, conquer China. Suffice it to say, they never got further than Korea. It was a disaster.
Okay, yeah, the Admiral G series that you guys have been telling me to check out, and it's on the poll that I put on the community tab. You guys have said that is like the spiritual successor to this series, and a lot of you want me to do that one next. That's why it's on there. And it takes place in Korea, so maybe it's that part. Is that the part where that occurs, like where they get as far as Korea? That I'm going to definitely check that out at some point. I don't know. It's probably not going to be the next one I check out, but it's definitely on my list of priorities. It's going to be on future polls.
Sides lost hundreds of thousands of people, and the brutality of the war was unimaginable. It's a story for another extra history series, but for our tale, it's important to know that the Japanese had to withdraw from Korea after uncountable losses. But remember how Tokugawa got an exemption from having his men serve in Hideyoshi's armies? That meant that Tokugawa didn't suffer any losses from the Korean campaign, and in 1598, as the war draws to its close, and Hideyoshi nears the end of his life with only a 5-year-old son to succeed him, this leaves Tokugawa in a unique position. Join us next time as we
That's
conclude
kind of
the
exciting.
Sengoku Jidai.
So yeah, I can vaguely see what direction this might be going. And I'm very excited for the Admiral Yi stuff. Like, I already put it up for vote, so there's no going back at this point. I'm picking whatever you guys happen to pick. Because I'm also very excited about the Otto von Bismarck stuff as kind of like a deep dive into something that I was able to discuss in the Seminole tragedy stuff. So there's definitely something there that I've gone into before, but this is really cool. And you guys have recommended a whole bunch of videos on this period, so I have no shortage of stuff to check out. I still feel like the way I approach it doesn't really fit the time. I'm still thinking about it very much as an American history guy, very much as like a 19th, 18th century guy. So that is definitely a weakness going into this, but I feel like I'm better with this now than I was at episode 1. I feel like I'm getting a slightly better idea of it. And any improvement is improvement, right? So, yeah, so go vote in the poll, unless you're from the future and it's already been decided, in which case, don't bother. I don't know, just watch whatever ended up being picked, and yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for participating in the poll. Thank you for watching this series with me, and we are going to conclude it next time. So that's it. Later.